First of all, I would just like to hear your thoughts on what we just heard from Paul Johnson.
Well, I think it's an extraordinary story. I think everybody agrees on that. I think it's very, very, very important that The Guardian did the good job that they had done. That Edward Snowden realized what he was looking at work and decided that there was a future for him as in life as a whistleblower, and that it was important for his fellow Americans and, well, the people of the world to know how close to Orwell's 1984 we really are.
Mm-hmm. And you and your colleagues at the Swedish television were the first Swedish journalists who got to actually see the leaked files. You met up with Glenn Greenwald, who was working for The Guardian. You met him in Rio, and you were the first to report on them. Tell us briefly, how did that happen? That was a long story before you met.
Yeah, it was the first thing. We did a story in 2003 on the FRA, the Swedish Signals Intelligence Agency. Basically the same story that we did last year, only lacking the Snowden documents. So it was all very theoretical, but it was an interesting story. So I've been interested in this for 10 years, and when Edward came out and I started reading The Guardian, I just thought, well, I need to get hold of the phone. So I called all my friends at The Guardian. We cooperated with them on the bribery of the Swedish jet fighter JAS in South Africa. So we had good relations with them. So I got on the phone and I called all the numbers I had at The Guardian, and they all answered very politely, as they do in Britain. But it only took me 6 months to get hold of Greenwald anyway, because there were a few other people in the queue there. So it was a very, very cumbersome 6 months as a journalist. Basically being last one in the line of 1,000 people, and the only thing you can do is wait. Mm-hmm. And finally, we all called and said, "It's your lucky day." And I thought, well, maybe at least now it starts.
And it did start, and we'll show just a short clip because you met up with him.
Before you see this, I would like to tell you, the audience, something. When Glenn wrote that letter, there were 4 weeks to our transmission date, the 18th of December. It normally takes about 3 months to do Uppdrag Granskning, an hour Uppdrag Granskning. You just don't do it in 4 weeks. But we did it. The only way to do it was to film ourselves, because we didn't know what would be in the document. So I just want to say this. We need to get a few more tools in our toolbox, apart from the pen and the paper. We need to know how to encrypt. This story about Glenn Greenwald, everybody laughs about it. You know, that he gets this email from Snowden, and Snowden is trying to explain to him how you do PGP. I mean, PGP has been around for 15 years, 20 years. Why does not journalists know how to handle it? It's because they don't care about their sources. They know that everybody's listening out there. They know that the police is coming in through the gates of media houses, but they don't decrypt. Why? Why? Are they imbecile? No, they're just lazy. I think it's time to watch enough. And, you know, read a few articles in The Guardian and you know why you need to do this shit.
Is Edward Snowden a hero or a traitor?
I think hero is a very strong word, but I think that he's much more of a hero. And he's definitely not a traitor. I think it's quite bizarre how the authorities have used the terrorist legislation and the kind of rhetorics of espionage and these kind of words to label Edward Snowden. Because he's definitely not a spy or anything like that. He has in the public interest revealed very important information about how the democracies act and how democracies control its own people. And that can never be framed in the language of espionage or in the language of traitor or anything like that. And I think that, for me at least, in the American debate, the first few weeks scared me quite a lot, that normally quite sensible persons and normally debaters also on the left use this very, very harsh rhetoric against him. And I think that is a problem. It never really occurred like that in Sweden, but we have seen similar things, like when the government, for example, tried to hush up the Saudi weapons scandal, using phrases like national security and using this more or less a rubber stamp, top secret marker on things that I think that you framed it very well when you say this is a matter of embarrassment. I think it's much more a matter of embarrassment than a matter of national security. It's a matter of governments trying to not embarrass themselves.
Peter, how would you characterize what Edward Snowden, what the affair has revealed?
I can just say before I answer that question, I feel extremely grateful to The Guardian for this revelation and for all of the things that you have published in the Snowden affair. I mean, sometimes we take for granted these kind of stories and the work that newspapers are doing, but it takes resources, energy, guts in order to do it. And you did it, and you took personal risks throughout the publications of all these things. And you were attacked in your own country, and you're still under attack. So for that, I just want to say thank you. Because it serves greater good for all of us, I think, not only in Britain, but throughout Europe and in the world. And this revelation really, I think, I'm not sure if I would call him a hero, but maybe he's a hero. But he has definitely, Edward Snowden has definitely strengthened our democracies, because he has, together with Guardian and the Washington Post, with Clinton Wood, pointed at core issues in our democracies, how our democracies works, and the right that we all have to a private sphere, and a very, I think, important discussion on the right balance between anti-terror measures that are legitimate and the right to integrity, personal integrity. So I think that and the reaction in the US with the panel that Obama appointed and the recommendation that came out and everything that has been said from politicians in the US, that they want to change the system, they want to see an overhaul, they want to take steps in a different direction, that this has been important, this has strengthened us all.
What would you say, Anders, are the consequences from a journalistic point of view, for press freedom, if you will, from the Snowden affair and from Guardian's revelations?
When you were speaking, I recall his story about the Duke of Wellington in the 18th century, when he was pressed not to reveal the memoirs of a highly public British figure who was the memoirs of his mistress. And his response was, "Publish and be damned." And I think that quite sums it up, that this is, exactly as Peter said, it's very important that you actually went through with this. And I think the key lesson is that response to an attack, because this is a major attack on free media in a country we normally recognize as a democracy, in this term, it is authoritarian method. It's not democratic method. It is an attack on press freedom. That is best repelled by publishing, because that's the measure, that's the possibility we have. And to not yield to this argument, even if they use the argument of national security, because media is not responsible for national security. It's not our responsibility. It's their responsibility. And I think that you summed it up when you said you lost the files.
Exactly.
I think it's a key. It's a key here. It's not the media responsibility to take this. Then, of course, it is sensitive decisions on publishing. But the main key is, I think Duke of Wellington's response is quite good. You have to publish and be damned.
And when it comes to the facts that the Edward Snowden files have revealed, what do you think about the Swedish authorities' reactions, or lack of reactions? I know, Peter, you have said that you're surprised about the silence from the Swedish government when it comes to this.
Silence from most of the political parties, except maybe the Green Party and the Left Party, and some people in the Liberal Party. I think most politicians in Sweden did not want to unleash a discussion here in Sweden about the FRA once again, because they remembered everything that happened a couple of years ago when the Pirate Party came up and were elected to the European Parliament. They were afraid of that discussion. And they also knew that in Sweden there is a great level of trust in public authorities. And I think there was a moment when that trust was abused. They knew that if we just say that you can trust the FRA, you can trust that they are doing the right thing. We're not going to have a discussion on this, but trust us. They knew that a lot of people would follow. And that was a pity that we did not have the proper discussion. Fredrik could not do the interview with the people from the FRA and ask the right questions and ask them time and time again. We were not able to do that.
Anders, what do you say about the reactions?
I think that when I first discussed this before, I got the question, could this happen in Sweden? And I said, no, it can't. Exactly like Peter said, and then I start thinking, but it has happened. It happens all the time, in different ways. It's not like you destroy the hard drives. But if you look at the Saudi weapons scandal, for example, we had one head of the Swedish authority, FOE, who was lying on tape, and he was reappointed just after that, after lying. You had a minister who was maybe not lying, but somewhere there, and using this top secret marker on basically everything. And you had authorities starting to investigate the sources of the journalists, etc., etc. So very clearly these things happen in different ways in Sweden. And I think that the debate on the NSA and the debate on FRA, it sort of comes together into this whole debate on press freedom, on individual liberty, on the role of the state. And I think, exactly as Peter is saying, we have a great trust in the state in Sweden. We don't think that, like my reaction, we don't think that this could happen, even if we know that this isn't really true. And I think that this is a kind of the big untold story here, and the story that should be told is the story about the FRA. What is exactly the internal espionage in Sweden? How does it really work? This story is not there, and I think that one of the results of it's not being a debate on NSA is that no one really has succeeded going through with this story, and this story is still untold.
We did not even have a public hearing in Parliament with the FRA, which you had in Britain. They just said that it's not necessary. We don't need that.
No,
end of story. Incredible.
And the fascinating thing is that none of the major parties actually tried to push this. It's sort of been a non-issue.
There is an unholy alliance between the Social Democrats and the Moderate Party in this area. And I think that explains a lot, but it can't be the only explanation. I think the smaller parties should get together and demand a public hearing in Parliament, and that would be a good start.
But I think there is a definite reason why we have this situation. They all know how dependent we are on America. They don't want to ruin our relation. We saw it in the extraordinary rendition story when they allowed them to come to Sweden to actually basically kidnap asylum seekers here. We've seen it in case after case. You know, basically they know where the engines for the JAS Gripen comes from. You know, and they know who says yes, you can have them. And they know what they're getting from the NSA. They know how quickly they will get a satellite picture over northern Afghanistan with the help of the Americans. And if they don't have that, they have a big problem. So I think that is something that, you know, there we have the real reason. But there was an interesting, I heard the interesting thing yesterday that another person wanted to be here, not Stefan Löfven. He said this would be a very interesting seminar. I don't know if Stefan is here, but you all know that that's the probable next Prime Minister in Sweden. And I think that would have been I think it was interesting that he said it would be interesting to be here. And it would have been very interesting to ask him, will you allow Edward Snowden asylum in Sweden?
That's the next one.
Something for the migration courts.
And that's actually my next question, because going back to the person, Edward Snowden, he's in Russia, as you all know. He's in Moscow. He has temporary asylum. And he said in a recent interview with the Brazilian TV that he's applied for asylum in several other countries. We don't know if Sweden is among them. Brazil is one of them. Do you think he should be granted asylum in Sweden? Peter Wolodarski?
I think the best thing that would happen is if Edward Snowden was pardoned by the US, he would be able to return back to his home country. And there are voices in America that
New York Times editorial
they try
arguing for
and
this.
the winds are blowing in this direction, I think. But that would be the best thing.
Mm-hmm. And the second best?
Well, I have looked at this case and compared it to our regulation.
Oh,
Well, I think he should be granted asylum here, okay? Let's say that. Yes.
I think that of course he has asylum reasons, it's quite obvious. And if you look at the situation, he hasn't committed crimes like the ones he's accused of. So, and he's hunted by half of the world. So of course there is a clear base of giving him asylum. I think that would be a very interesting signal in these days to do that. And I think that Sweden should, with our history of also openness, of transparency, of free press, of liberty that we have, of course we could do something like that. That would be also a very good signal to the rest of Europe and to the United States if we do that. So I think it's a very good idea.
They should react to the developments in both the UK and the US, and they should actually initiate a discussion on this and think through their policies.
I think one of the reasons to feel positive is we've seen the work that Frederick's done on TV and radio here. We know about Peter's newspaper, and to support Peter gave us at the time when we were under personal attack, which we were very, very grateful for. But also we've seen what has emerged is a new sense of collaboration as well. So we collaborated with the New York Times, we collaborated with the Washington Post as well. They are our competitors, but we're collaborating with them. We collaborated with Spiegel, we've collaborated with Le Monde, etc. So I think if there's this international collaboration amongst journalists, i.e. to get to the stories, I think that's a very, very good thing, the thing to feel very proud of in that sort of sense.
Anders?
Just a reflection on that also is that I think one of the keys is resources to investigative journalism. Because what you see now in the whole industry is that since there is a lack of funding, there is many newspapers, local newspapers that are closing down. There will be a crisis on national level. I mean, there is a crisis to a certain extent, and there is very important, both for the public service and also for the large papers, to actually keep investigative journalism as something really sacred. It takes time, it costs money, but without it, you would never have possibilities to actually go through materials like this or find things that the authorities really don't want you to find. So there is a key also in our industry at the moment where we really need to prioritize this.
We're going to sum up the seminar now. Silla, can I ask you to come back up on stage? And Paul, if I can ask you as the last question, what is the biggest lesson for you from the whole Snowden affair?
The biggest lesson really is that if you said to me 13, 14 months ago that we'd be using encrypted chat, that we'd be using encrypted email, that we'd use encryption to store files through TrueCrypt, and that where appropriate we'd use Tor to anonymise ourselves, and that we'd be telling every reporter that this isn't your friend, I'd have thought you were a bit paranoid. But now we do all of those things. It's quite extraordinary. It's a complete change in our operating processes. Although I took Frederick's orders there very much to heart.
And Silla Bergh, as head of the Swedish radio, what is the biggest lesson for you?
Well, there are several actually. And first of all, I would like to thank Paul for sharing his knowledge with us, because I think it's been extremely interesting, and I've heard you before. I learned some new things today. But first of all, you need skillful people. I mean, that's absolutely the key thing. If you want to prioritize this, which I would like to do, you also need the right people at the right places, the right reporters and the right editors that has the courage and the knowledge to do this. Otherwise, these stories will never be told. And also, you need an environment where whistleblowers actually feel safe to approach you. I mean, and for that you need trusted reporters that are well known and that people trust. But you also need to raise the level of consciousness among everybody at the Swedish radio. I agree with you fully. I'm very scared about this tool. This is not your private gadget. This is not your friend. This is not a toy. This is a computer with a lot of information in it. And if we don't treat it in the right way, any reporter, any editor, any manager, really, at the Swedish radio, we will put people's life in danger and we will lose stories. So I'm very happy that Fredrik is all for this, because now he's going to join my company, and I'm sure we're going to be much better in the future.
And looking ahead, last of all, who is the next Edward Snowden? Or rather, in what areas do we need another whistleblower like Edward Snowden?
Well, of course, it's extremely important when you have to do with public money. But I, personally, being a business reporter once, would like to have more of these stories from the A-listed companies. They are really, really hard to get to. Because there's no protection, really, for people that are employed by an A-listed company, at least not in Sweden. And therefore they are very quiet, very scared, and we don't get very many stories about what's going on within the big, the largest companies in Sweden, I would say.
Well, there will definitely be an aftermath after this story, politically, journalistically, even in Hollywood. Paul, there will be an aftermath. We can reveal that there will be a film made by Oliver Stone.
That's right, yeah, Oliver Stone. So it's bound to be a very long film.